All right, my friends, welcome to Drug Trap Part 2, part of the ever-growing, ever-expanding Nostalgia Trap universe. David Parsons here. Hope you are doing well. I want to think about booze today. Not only my own personal history, but maybe some reflections on the larger role that alcohol has played in the history of the world. I'm not trying to render any particular judgment in talking about these drugs. I know that in the previous episode, if you listen to part 1 on opiates and pills, I did have a sort of negative take on those things. I think that's generally in keeping with most people's attitudes that opiates are a dangerous path, even though they have their, I guess, fans and promoters. One thing that struck me, and I think this will come up especially when I talk about marijuana, is that you don't really see like magazines and head shops and a whole culture around heroin the way you do with marijuana. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember High Times magazine, but like that was a whole sort of entryway into not just smoking weed, but the kind of community and culture and art and kind of attitudes, even politics that went with it. I think the first time that I ever read 9/11 conspiracy theories, like written out in print, it was in High Times magazine. And I think that High Times magazine actually introduced me to a lot of weird conspiracy theories and what might be called crypto politics. But either way, you don't see that with heroin. Like, heroin doesn't have, like, stores and shirts and, like, I do heroin type advertising and things like that. And I think there are probably reasons for that. But one of them, beyond heroin being kind of, I think, widely considered a toxic poison, and opiates being a curse on our society, there just isn't, like I was talking about in the first episode, there isn't a sense that heroin creates communities of art and culture. That might be contradicted by the whole history of the 1990s, in which there was a kind of burst of expression about heroin. But one thing I remember is that there was a lot of moralizing in the 1990s by Republicans like Bob Dole, who ran for president in 1996 and lost to Bill Clinton. That was the first presidential election that I was old enough to vote in, and I remember it clearly. Bob Dole came out and made like speeches about movies like Pulp Fiction and Trainspotting, which he said glorified heroin use and made it hip and cool. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't know if you've seen those movies. I mean, heroin was around, and I suppose there was sort of a hip cachet to it in the 90s, but what I remember most about those movies is that they scared the shit out of me in terms of showing heroin use and abuse as a nightmare. I mean, the iconic image of Trainspotting, there are a few. If you've seen this movie, I'm sure you have a few in your head right now. Not only a dead baby crawling on the ceiling while one of the characters is going through the throes of heroin withdrawal, and that baby cranking its head around on the ceiling and looking down at him. There's that image. But there's also the image of, I think it's Ewan McGregor's character crawling literally into a toilet to chase heroin. And it didn't seem like those movies were necessarily glorifying it in the way that the Republican Party and other moralizing forces were trying to portray them. But in either case, I wanted to think about booze today and alcohol and the role it's played in my life, in the lives of the people around me. And again, I'm not trying to render judgment here about something being good or bad. I just want to tell some stories, and as I tell the stories, what happens for me is that talking is thinking for me, and I will think through what I really kind of feel about that history together with you. So let's take the journey.